Thank you, Ms. Botchin. Now we yield 5 minutes to Mr. Couchman.
Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member Boyle, and all members of the committee, thank you for continuing to consider systemic solutions to systemic problems. Controlling the debt burden can protect Americans from higher costs, expand opportunity, and defuse the threats to our prosperity, our security, and even our political system. Overwhelming support exists for the concept of budget balance, but designing a balanced budget amendment is challenging. So are complementary changes to statute. When the norm against non-emergency public debt frayed in the Great Depression, bipartisan support for balanced budget rules emerged in Congress. BBAs passed the Senate in 1982 and the House in 1995. Almost every state requires balanced operating budgets. Nearly all countries with advanced economies do too. 80% of Americans support a constitutional amendment that would require a balanced budget within 10 years. Most economists think balance should be done over the course of the business cycle rather than yearly. Today's growing debt burden, ongoing inflation and interest rate pressures, and increasing federal interest costs may promote bipartisan consensus to control the debt. To get the best results, Congress needs institutional upgrades that can also make America's legislature a better place to serve. Drafting BBA language is challenging. Annual balance is a common fatal flaw. Revenue is volatile. Tightly binding spending to revenue would drive policy instability, as Figure 1 in my written testimony shows. Fortunately, annual balance isn't necessary. Chairman Arrington's business cycle BBA defines a rolling average relationship between spending and revenue, while Representative Moran and Senator Braun's principles-based BBA would rely on implementing legislation for the details. Either would allow a smooth, predictable path for non-emergency budgets. Representative McClintock's debt limit amendment might as well, depending on definitions and reserve funds. Some BBAs exclude payment of debt from spending, so Congress could target full or primary balance. There's a big difference. Other BBAs require full balance, which implies much more deficit reduction. The Arrington and Moran BBAs use the term expenditures instead of outlays for spending. Expenditures is a general term, while outlays is statutory, and would create big management challenges. Emergencies do happen, of course. The approval threshold should be high enough to limit abuse, yet low enough for Congress to address crises. 3/5, 2/3, and 3/4 are often proposed, but 2/3 is the most constitutionally consistent. Some BBAs have lower additional waivers, and some could even encourage kinetic military action. Beyond the ratification period, some BBAs would allow a full decade to reach balance. 5 years is also common, 2 less so, and 1 BBA would require balance upon ratification. Chairman Arrington's BBA uses declining fractions to reach balance. Others don't lay out a specific path. References to statute in the Constitution could prop up outdated approaches or let anachronisms accumulate, among other issues. Outlays is one example of a statutory reference. Another is the statutory debt limit. Maybe Congress wouldn't need it anymore, but maybe it could help with automatic enforcement. The president's annual budget request is another, with risks of changing the balance of powers. Some provisions are simply fatal to reaching 2/3 support in Congress, among other issues. They include supermajorities to increase revenue or to exceed a spending to GDP ratio, as well as excluding Social Security and Medicare. Covering all programs in a BBA does not mean that Congress must treat them equally or that automatic enforcement must apply equally. Courts are an important part of our system of checks and balances, yet fiscal policy is inherently legislative. That said, Congress living up to a BBA may be the surest way to keep courts from stepping in, even if statute cannot fully constrain them. An approved or ratified BBA could push Congress to overhaul the broken budget process through the national consensus-building exercise of approving and ratifying a BBA. Ultimately, Congress needs an annual budget process that starts on time, ends on time, and in the meantime, lets all members contribute. It should encourage collaboration, unleash creativity, and help Congress address all kinds of challenges. Restoring the balance norm has overwhelming public support, and new BBAs resolve longstanding design problems. With a BBA and related statutory changes, bottom-up bipartisan deal-making within an effective budget process can make America's future brighter than ever. My written testimony expands on these themes, which I ask to be included in the record,
So ordered.
and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Mr.